Chapter 35. Tessa woke up slowly. She was cold and sore and achy. She felt groggy, like she'd been drugged. Something was poking uncomfortably against her stomach. She rolled slightly so she was on her side instead of face down, and at least that stopped the feeling that something was jabbing against her. She still hadn't opened her eyes. She remembered the last time she'd awakened, the feel of the sunlight on her face, all the glory of all that brightness. Even through her closed eyelids, she could tell she wasn't in sunlight now. That sunlight before was real, she told herself stubbornly, trying to find something to cling to. In the war zone. And already she'd found something to mentally stumble over. Because if the computer voice had told the truth, and if Tessa and Gideon and Deck could believe what they themselves had seen, then the war zone wasn't a war zone. It was a peace zone, a demilitarized zone, an empty zone, a zone without humans. Because the humans were the ones who brought war and death and killing, just like Gideon had. No, he didn't, Tessa thought. He never killed anyone. She opened one eye halfway, curiosity finally getting the better of her. Was she still with Gideon and Deck, or had the three of them been separated to be punished individually? It took Tessa a long moment, and she had to open both eyes before she could completely orient herself in the dim, almost non-existent light. She had no bandages on her arm, and only the tiniest hint of a scab, so she'd been shot with some sort of tranquilizer dart rather than an actual bullet. That gave her hope that Gideon and Deck would be alive too. But where were they? She looked a little farther out. She was lying on a concrete floor in what appeared to be a prison cell. She could see a barred door and a small barred window that let in the only light. And on either side of her, she could see two lumps. Gideon and Deck. Tessa rolled over onto her back so she could look back and forth between the two of them. She reached out and jostled first Gideon's shoulder, then Deck's. "Wake up," she whispered. "Look, here's some good news. They let us stay together." "Just so they can eavesdrop on us," Gideon murmured back. "So they can hear us if we say anything incriminating." Tessa propped herself up on her elbows. Her head spun, and for a moment she thought she was going to pass out again. But then she steadied herself. "Then let's say things that will get us out of here," she argued. "Let's say what the computer told us, the truth. Let's tell everyone." This seemed so right to her. People had to know. She thought about the grim, desperate lives people lived back in Waterford City. None of that was necessary. They were living that way because of the war. But if the war wasn't real, what could their lives be like now? Was it that? What was possible? Gideon only moaned. "Tessa, it will be the computer system monitoring our conversation," he said. "If the computer system can carry on a whole fake war for 75 years, don't you think it can edit our conversation to prove anything it wants to us? It wants about us? It can prove we deserve to die, too," Deck whimpered. Tessa looked back and forth between Gideon and Deck, both sprawled helplessly on the floor. Neither of them seemed to have the energy left to move. Deck's words began to sink in. "Die, too?" Tessa said. "Weren't you listening before? Nobody's dying in the war. Nobody's died in the war for 75 years. Deck sat up. She didn't wobble or look the slightest bit woozy. She reached over and grabbed Tessa by the front of her shirt. She pulled Tessa close so she could look directly in the eye. "Both my parents died in the war," Deck told Tessa. "Both of them. They worked in the bomb factory making bombs that were never even used. With my mother, it was a slow death. The poison she handled seeping into her veins, killing her day by day by day. I watched my mother die, a little bit more every day. With my father, it was sudden. One day he went to work fixing gears in a machine, and an explosion collapsed an entire wing of the factory on top of him. That's what happens sometimes when you work around explosives. And it was all for no reason. None. They didn't even get treated like heroes because they didn't die in battle. They were just dead." She finished by shoving Tessa away. Tessa sprawled back against Gideon's unmoving form. "I'm sorry," Tessa whispered, and she wasn't sure whether she was apologizing to Gideon or Deck. Maybe both of them. She pulled back from Gideon a little so she was taking up only her own space, halfway between the other two. Deck in her fury, Gideon in his despair. "But the two of you can get us out of here, can't you?" Tessa asked. "You got us out of Santel and Shargo and General Kentop's office. Getting us out of this prison should be easy." Deck snorted. "All we ever did was get ourselves from one bad place to another," she said angrily. "That's all there is in this world." Gideon barely lifted his head. "Didn't you understand anything you heard back in the control room?" he asked Tessa. "The computer system's been fooling everyone for the past 75 years. You think the three of us are going to outsmart it? It's just been toying with us all along, playing like Tessa could tell he was going to say, like it was just playing with me, making me a hero, making everyone think I was so great, making me think I was so great, and then think I was so awful. Gideon let his head fall back to the floor. But the computer system, Tessa began, and then stopped, because she couldn't straighten out the tangle of her thoughts. Did the computer system want them to die? Why would that be its goal? To keep it secret, Tessa thought. But the computer system could have stopped them long before this point. It had had control over their plane when they were first flying back into Easton. It easily could have made them crash if it wanted. Or, for that matter, it probably could have caused a crash when they were flying out of Easton in the first place, into the war zone. But it didn't do that, Tessa thought. It let us keep going until we found out the secret. Was that its goal? Why? Tessa looked back and forth between Deck and Gideon, hoping one of them would figure out all this before she had to. They were both so much smarter than Tessa, or at least better with computers, better with their hands, better with mechanical things, better with everything that Tessa had always been taught really mattered. But the computer system acted like I might know something valuable too, Tessa thought. What could that be? She looked again at Gideon, really trying to see this time. Even in the dim light, Tessa could tell that his uniform was stained and ripped beyond repair. His blonde hair was clumped with grease and sweat, dirt and blood. He had dark circles under his eyes, cuts and bruises across his face. He looked even worse than all the people she'd been used to seeing back home in Waterford City. Was this really the same person she'd worshipped up on the stage in the city auditorium, glowing in his spotless white uniform? How much of that viewpoint had been colored by Tessa wanting him to be the hero, the angel, the saint? It wasn't true, she thought. It was never true. But wasn't it worth something that he thought he was protecting his country, and that he was capable of sitting at a computer for 12 hours straight, day after day after day, trying so hard because he thought that he was doing that was the right thing to do? He was capable of killing people too, Tessa reminded herself. He thought that's what he'd done. And then he'd regretted it, and tried to figure out a way to make amends. Gideon was too complicated to think about. Tessa looked at Deck instead. From the very beginning, when Deck had rolled out of the airplane closet, Tessa had been in awe of her. Deck, the genius street kid, the miniature tough who could fly a plane better than a military pilot and figure out how to get fuel from tanks abandoned more than 75 years ago. Deck always knew how to take care of herself. And here she was, sobbing, her heart broken all over again now that she knew her parents had devoted their entire working lives, and lost their lives, to a pointless cause. Now that she thought that their deaths hadn't meant anything. Deck was complicated too. What if it's the same way with the computer system, Tessa thought? What if we're only seeing one side of its personality, and we need to see all the complications to really understand? But that was silly. Computer systems didn't have personalities. They could be complex. A system controlling the entire military would have to be. But they still had to be logical. As the computer itself had told Tessa and Gideon and Deck, computers could only do what they were programmed to do. Tessa jerked back, every bit as jolted as if she'd been struck by lightning. What had the computer's voice's exact words been? Hadn't it told them what it had been guiding it all along? We can only do what we're programmed to do. I was programmed to. Why couldn't Tessa remember? They had been talking about why a computer couldn't be a traitor, why the computer's lies about the war fit with its goals, why the computer had to stop humanity from destroying itself. Tessa remembered. I was programmed to find a way to win the war. Gideon! Deck! Tessa exclaimed, sitting fully upright now. I figured it out. The computer system wanted us to know the secret. It was helping us all along, because that's the way to win the war. Deck's angry scowl gained an edge of confusion. Gideon barely grunted. Didn't you hear me? Tessa asked. Most people trying to win a war, Deck muttered, would start by really using the bombs they build. No, Tessa said. The computer system told us why that wouldn't work. It would have led to total destruction of the planet. Nobody wins that way. The sides were too evenly matched, or the weapons were too terrible, or something like that. I'm not a military strategist. I don't know the exact reasons, but the computer system knows what it's doing. By counting on 3 kids, when it's already got the world's best military at its disposal, Gideon snarled. You didn't even know what the war was about. Deck didn't even care enough to go to the military academy when she was chosen for it. When I got the notice the day after my father died, Deck asked, what would you have done? Tessa put a hand out in each direction, in case she had to hold Gideon and Deck apart. Exactly, she said. We're not just three random kids. Gideon's a talented military pilot, a potential military hero, who sees why the killing was wrong, or would have been wrong, I mean. And Deck is someone who has every reason to understand why this fake war is bad for our country. And you? Deck challenged. I guess because I read all those books, I'm someone who knows what was good about humanity before the war, Tessa said, frowning slightly because she didn't really see why the computer system would have wanted her along. Maybe there hadn't been a reason for her to be included. It had just happened. You're someone who holds on to hope, Gideon said softly, no matter what. For a moment, Tessa thought he was going to sit up and agree with her about everything. He could talk Deck into helping too. But he only began shaking his head, even as he kept laying flat on the floor, staring up at the bars that locked them in. It's an admirable trade, Gideon went on, but the thing is, there isn't any hope in this situation. The computer system let the guards find us and arrest us. We're trapped in here. There's nothing we can do. We can tell the guards the truth, Tessa said. We can tell them what the war zone's really like. We can tell everyone who gets near our cell. She started to scramble up, but that just brought back the poking sensation inside her stomach. We already tried to tell General Kantoff what we saw in the war zone, Gideon said. He just thought we were crazy. That's what everyone would think. Then we show them the same proof we saw, Tessa said, crouching half up and half down on one knee. We don't have that proof anymore, Deck said. It's all in the control room. And we don't have anything to communicate with anyhow, Gideon added glumly. If the computer system really wanted us to fix all this, it would have left us something to work with. Tessa shifted positions, which only intensified the poking sensation. Something seemed to be in her pocket. She remembered what it was. We do have something to work with, she said. She began pulling circuits and wires out of her pocket. The computer system didn't let the guards in until after I shoved the miniature laptop in my pocket. It's in pieces now, but you two can put it back together, can't you? Tessa held out a whole handful of computer parts. Gideon sat up and looked. We can, he said softly. Deck was looking too, her eyes were very wide. And we will, she said.